In 1917, 3 young shepherd children claimed to see what they believed was an apparition of the Virgin Mary right here in Fatima in central Portugal. They claimed that over the course of 6 months, the apparition gave them 3 secrets which they had to keep and reveal at a later date. On the final vision, in October of that year, a miracle was performed in front of over 100,000 people right there behind me. But there's so many unanswered questions. What really went on over the course of 1917? Why did the Vatican keep the secrets for so long, only revealing 2 of them? Was one of them an apocalyptic secret? Or was the whole thing just one great big hoax? Now, before we go any further, I just want to point out that everyone is entitled to their own religious opinions. What goes on, it's your choice. I'm simply going to go over the facts of what happened here in 1917. It's up to you to choose whether you believe it or not believe it. I will not enforce any opinion on the viewers in this video.
For centuries, many people have claimed to have seen apparitions of the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, and whilst many of these occurred hundreds of years ago, there have been many recent sightings caught on camera. For several days, thousands of people visited this church in Egypt after they believed they could see an apparition on the roof. This footage went viral online. It's believed to have been taken in the Ivory Coast. A bright light appears through some clouds and appears to dazzle a group of spectators. They claim that they could see the Virgin Mary, but when we invert the light, we can clearly see there is something there. And this footage comes from Vietnam. This statue was built on the site of an 18th century sighting of the Virgin Mary. Recently, tears are said to have cried from its eyes, a modern day miracle. And as these people pray to it, it moves.
In my hometown of Newcastle is Jesmond, a leafy suburb. But the name Jesmond itself comes from the words Jesus Mound. And that itself comes from the fact, on this very site, by this well, there was a Marian sighting, along with the baby Jesus. People still believe to this day that miracles happen by taking a drink from this very water.
Lourdes in France remains one of the most recent sightings, but Fatima in Portugal has caused one of the biggest mysteries. Fatima itself is a place of mystery. The sighting of the Virgin Mary was in a place called Iria, believed to have taken its name from Saint Irene. She was a girl who in the 7th century pledged her life to God as a child and rejected a marriage proposal from a knight named Bertaldo. Another love interest, however, was also rejected, and he decided to spread a false rumour about her being pregnant. When these rumours got back to Bertaldo, he became jealous, and he had Irene killed and dumped in a river nearby. Her uncle, the Abbot Celio, had a vision from God of her death in a dream and led a group of villagers to a part of the river just a few miles away in a village called Santarem. And sure enough, the body of Irene was found, uninterrupted. This is where Christians believe divine intervention prevents the body from decomposing to show its holiness. As her body was being recovered, more water submerged it and it disappeared. Legend has it that the local monk is claimed to have buried it in a tomb in Fatima. Jacinta, Francisco and Lucia lived a couple of miles away from Fatima in this house. One day, while working on the family farm, watching sheep, they had their first sighting on May the 13th, 1917. As the children were sitting in the fields, they saw several flashes of lightning. As they walked home, the white light appeared above an oak tree, and there was the Virgin Mary in the middle. The apparition is said to have told the children not to be afraid, as she is from heaven. She said that she will appear for the next 6 months on the 13th day at the same hour, and then perform a miracle on the final day. She also promised that the children will go to heaven one day, and they must pray to their rosaries. Afterwards, the lady is said to have floated away, and the thunderstorm never came. Word began to spread, but Lucia wanted to keep it all a secret.
The second apparition occurred on the 13th of June, exactly a month after the first one. The children went to the exact same spot under the oak tree at noon, and they waited, and sure enough, they claimed the Virgin Mary arrived with a crash of thunder. However, this time a group of villagers had gone up because they'd heard some stories over what was going on. As Lucia was having a conversation with the Virgin Mary, witnesses claimed that they didn't hear anything, they couldn't see anything in return, although some said that they could hear a faint buzzing sound when the Virgin Mary was said to be replying to Lucia's questions. Lucia claims she was told to pray every single day, and once again to return to the exact spot in a month's time.
One of the messages given to Lucia during the second apparition was that she must learn how to read and continue to pray to her rosary. Of the group of people who had followed the children up to the sighting included one lady who had taken her disabled son, believing a miracle would happen. It didn't. The mob pestered the children, asking them questions, but the children refused to answer and simply left and went home.
By now, there was all sorts of gossip going around in Fatima. Some people claimed that maybe it wasn't the Virgin Mary after all. It could have been the work of the devil trying to lure them in. But whatever, the children still went along on the 13th of July, and this time 2,000 people turned up. It's claimed that when the Virgin Mary appeared, Lucia turned round and told everybody to remove their hats and to pray. They followed.
The apparition is said to have revealed a vision of hell to the children and told them to keep coming back on the 13th day of each month, and in October she would perform a miracle for all and reveal who she is. Some witnesses claimed to have heard a clap of thunder as Lucia claimed the lady was leaving. Afterwards, the crowd mobbed the children, asking them more questions. The children told people they'd been told a secret, but could not reveal. After the vision, discrepancies in versions of events began to appear between what Lucia had told a local priest straight after and her transcribed version of events in the 1930s. For example, the vision of hell was something she only mentioned 20 years after these visions.
On August the 3rd, 1917, there was now 12,000 people in Fatima wanting to come and see these so-called visions. Rumours had gone around and it was now spreading in further parts of Portugal. This to the very dismay of a new Republican government who didn't like the idea of religion taking over the country. It is said that prosecutors arrested the 3 children and locked them up the night before. 2 of the children were taken away for a mock execution. Lucia was then asked again, "Will you confess that it was all a lie, and we'll let you go?" She refused. However, by now it was too late. She was not released in time for the so-called 4th apparition. Many people who had arrived in Fatima were very disappointed and left. But that was not the end. The apparition occurred several days later in a town about 3 miles away.
The apparition occurred 6 days later, on August the 19th, in the village of Valinhos, a couple of miles south of Fatima, where the children were working in another field. This one was witnessed by one member of the children's family. Again, the apparition was invisible to him. The lady told the children to keep following her orders, and the money left as donations at the site would go towards building a church there.
On September the 13th, the 5th apparition occurred. This time 20,000 people had descended in this tiny little Portuguese place. This one was a bit more serious.
the lady told the children to continue to pray to the rosary every day until the end of the war. Remember, this was all during World War I. Lucia began to ask the lady questions. Will you cure the little deaf and dumb girl in the village? The lady said she will improve within the year. Lucia then said, many people claim that I am deceiving people and that I should be hanged or burned. Will you perform a miracle so that they will believe? The lady said, yes. In October, I will perform a miracle on October the 13th.
On October the 13th, 1917, the final apparition is said to have occurred. By now, over 100,000 people had descended into what was once a small farming hamlet. There was nowhere for them to stay. They slept outside and they slept on the floor, even in the three shepherds' house. As the apparition is said to have occurred, over there by the tree, over 100,000 people are said to have witnessed the promised miracle. While several people claimed they saw absolutely nothing at all, there are eyewitness accounts that people said the sun in the sky danced, spun around, changed colour, the rain stopped, the heavens opened. There were all sorts of eyewitness accounts.
It is still much debate as to what happened during this final miracle. Whilst the majority of people on the day claimed absolutely nothing happened at all, eyewitness accounts started to appear in newspapers in Lisbon and other areas of Portugal. Some claimed the sun danced, some claimed it span around, some just said it was a bright light, but the majority actually claimed they saw nothing at all. Most people stayed after the miracle and prayed. For days after, churches in the surrounding towns and villages were packed full of worshippers. In the months that followed, the children had to go into hiding in a small farm about 6 miles away. The shrine at the site was torn down by people angry over what they saw was a hoax in the name of their religion. Meanwhile, the Republican dictatorship was overthrown soon after, and the children's claims started to be taken more seriously by the new pro-Catholic government. A year later, in 1918, the great influenza pandemic swept across Europe and Portugal was badly hit. Lucia's house became a hospice, and the virus swept through the family, killing Jacinta and Francisco. Although surrounded by sickness, Lucia survived. This immunity was seen as a sign of holiness. This also saw the numbers of sick and dying people flocking to Fatima, hoping to be cured. It is said that some had success. From what was once a small farming hamlet, this is Fatima now. Yes, it's a city. And every shop you seem to go into, all you can buy is religious items. The amount of tourists that flock here are in the millions. But did it really happen, or was the whole thing just one big hoax? Well, a lot of people have looked into the story of Lucinda. I've done my own personal research. Lucinda was brought up as a very devout Catholic. It is said that from the age of 3, she idolised the Virgin Mary. The first sighting actually occurred about 2 years before 1917, in 1915. Lucia is said to have claimed, at the same tree, to have seen a floating statue made of snow. People brush these claims off, and Lucinda is said to have never talked about it again. A year later, she also claimed to have seen a saint, again in the same field. People laughed at her, and she never talked about it again. Does this mean that the sightings of 1917 were just in her mind? Remember, this is a girl obsessed with religion, and nobody else, other than the other 2 children, saw what they could see. And what about all the people who come here and have miracles? Well, literally millions of people have come here, and the amount of miracles that have been put down to visiting Fatima is about 10. It is estimated that over 170 million people have visited this place in the last 100 years. Now, bearing in mind there are about 10 10 miracles that are said to have occurred here of people who have been cured. That's about 1 in 17 million. But what about the supposed prophecies? There were 3 of them in total. One is claimed to have shown a vision of hell and predicted the end of World War I. Another is believed to have predicted World War II. But what about the supposed third prophecy? Well, Lucia is said to have written it down on a piece of paper, and that was taken away and kept in the Vatican. Nobody was allowed to know what it was. In 2000, it is said to have been revealed, but many people looked at the piece of paper that the priest read from and said that is not the same piece of paper that Lucia wrote her prophecy down. It is claimed that it simply was predicting the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II in the 1980s, which incidentally happened on the anniversary of the Fatima sightings. But many people are not convinced by this. Why was the priest reading from a piece of paper that was not what Lucia is said to have written it down on? Many conspiracy theories seem to predict that the third prophecy was apocalyptic, predicting the end of the world. Lucia went to her grave in 2005, and so far, she never confirmed what the third prophecy was.